Morning everybody, this is a quick heads up for what we'll be doing on Saturday, and a quick reminder, please read the next section of Calvin's commentary, chapter 17 to 19, but if you can only manage to do a bit of work in chapter 17, I'll be very happy if that's all you have time for, and look at the questions there that are prepared for you in the study guide book. And we're going to be picking up on discussing how we are to apply the content of Genesis, the narrative of Abraham, to ourselves. Remember, up to this point, especially in lecture 2, we were looking at Abraham, who provides in his life the background for Israel, very essential background for them to understand themselves as God's covenant people. And then, of course, he's a model for them. He experiences, in essence, what they're experiencing and have experienced. And God's grace to him is a very rich assurance of God's promised grace to them. And then he also foreshadows in his experience what they're going to be going through in their nationhood, as it were, under God. So there's a link from Abraham to Israel, and of course from Israel to us. And that enables us to see that the same things that pertain to Abraham pertain to us as the Lord's people. But in the third lecture, Dr. Pratt goes one step further, and I'd like to analyze that in terms of Genesis chapter 17, especially the renewal of the covenant. Walk before me and be blameless. And here in this lecture, if I can just give it my own quick summary, particularly the section I want to talk about on Saturday is what Dr. Pratt develops, especially in Galatians chapter 3, is the whole seed imagery, and that Christ is Abram's greater seed, the seed that is greater than Abraham himself, so that he can say in John chapter 8, before Abraham was, I am. And yet, as Paul says in Galatians 3:15, that seed is Christ. And he has a very nice discussion there of the collective nature of seed, the singular word, as well as its diverse nature. So it can apply to one seed or one type of seed, and it can apply, of course, to descendants generally considered. So it's a very nice little pun, I think, that's going on there, and it really helps us. But it serves for us to see the connection between Abraham and Christ, and then as we look at Abraham as the father, as it were, of the nation of Israel, they're sons of Abraham, we can see then the relationship between Israel and Abraham and Christ and us, and so Israel and us. Those are the connections that Dr. Pratt is making. So I'd like to do more proof of the pudding is in the eating, so to speak, and look at Genesis 17, especially verse 1, which I think has been a very difficult verse for people to apply to the Christian life, whether you're looking at Abraham as a model for us because we're sons of Abraham or children of Abraham, or whether you're looking at Abraham as a model for Israel and Abraham as a type of Christ. And so how do those words apply to us? Are we supposed to live perfect, holy lives? That's the bottom line. I am God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless. So that's the question we're going to look at, and we're going to test out Dr. Pratt's analogies between Abraham and Christ and Israel and the church, and see how we are expected to live a life of covenant faithfulness. And I think you'll see things a little bit more clearly once we've wrestled with this question. So please watch that video again and then have a look particularly at Calvin on Genesis chapter 17, that renewal of the covenant. He's got several helpful things to say, but he's not working in Dr. Pratt's framework, but it's good. He does make you pay attention to the text, and then we'll look at the text, and we'll look at 1 Corinthians 10, and we'll look at Hebrews, and we'll look at ourselves as the church in relation to Israel, and so our relationship to Abraham and to Christ. And I think you'll find it very helpful, especially those of you who are struggling with questions of covenant theology. I think you'll find it enormously beneficial. Lord helping us all. Well, may the Lord bless you all and richly reward your studies.